Hey friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about homebrewing magic items. I'll give you a little bit of my philosophy, a little bit of my system for coming up with this stuff. But before we even get into that, I want you to just forget generic +1 swords, boring stat buffs. Your players have seen it all. What I want you to come up with are magic items that feel truly special, that have a particular role in your game and in your game world. So stick around. We're going to walk through my process. All right, let's start off with a quick story. I'm running a one-shot for my gaming group, and I was using a pre-published one that I had found that I just thought was kind of interesting. It had some fun mechanics in it. But in that story, they were supposed to potentially, depending on what routes they took and how good their investigations were, they were going to come across a magical element. Now, as I was reading it, there's this picture of a guy basically stepping into the armor, and it closes around him and then gives him a stat buff. It was a cool idea. It fit the world that it was in, but I was a little bit bored with it. So I just turned it into full-blown Fallout power armor. So my players come across this. There's a character long dead in the story. It was a sorcerer who tinkered with magic and with science, and he had some bizarre inventions in his lab, and they come across this thing, and it's working. It has power, and they kind of, as soon as I showed the picture of it to my players knew exactly what it was. The characters didn't know what it was. And so there was a fun moment of them just playing with it, trying to figure out what it's capable of. Short time later, they ascend to the top of this tower where I've got set up the big bad end guy with his minions, and the big puzzle that needs to be solved to save the world is all in this location. And I'm thinking this they better be ready for a fight. Well, my fighter, who is donning the power armor, on his first move, flies the power armor over and just drops down and squashes my big bad end guy in a single move, just one shot into a puddle of jelly. Now, you might say, well, I could have fudged some rolls. I had to make a dodge. I could have, whatever. There's a lot of things I could have done there. But that moment was epic. And it changed that entire scene from what I had envisioned in my head as I was, reading through this thing, kind of planning the thing out. It changed that dynamic. It took that guy out. Now, the dude in the power armor is still surrounded by minions. You've got 3 other players who are a distance away. And again, there's a whole other puzzle that needed to be solved. So it didn't end the fight. It did change the dynamic, and it brought a level of excitement to the table that I really didn't expect. And it was awesome. And we still joke about that moment to this day. So with that as an example, let's talk about the process of coming up with magic items and how to make sure that they have a role. They have a purpose in the world. And I think oftentimes we'll start with a question of like, what's a cool effect I can put on a sword? And then we kind of build something around that. And I think it's the wrong approach. We need a story. All right. Why does this thing exist in world number one? So my example of the power suit, because there was a wizard / scientist who'd been experimenting with things beyond his ability, and he invented all of this weird stuff. That's why it's there. Okay. But why am I, as the storyteller, including it in the world? Because there's a problem that it solves, and it solved the problem of the big bad end guy. They could have gone through the whole adventure without that, but that tool became a thing, right? It became the way that they get past that obstacle. And I think you've got to create the problem first. Put them up against unbeatable odds. Let them even lose. Then they can come across an item that changes the game, and now they face that problem from a different point. Or sometimes it's fun to have this sort of planned out ahead of time, and you give them something that seems sort of mundane early on that they don't know what to do with, and it's just sitting in their inventory until that moment when it is obviously clear what that thing is and what it's for. And that becomes exciting. That becomes, we've already solved this problem. I think that's the place to start. Have a story about it. Tie it in to the narrative, even if it's used in unexpected ways. I didn't expect him to one-shot my big bad end guy. I thought it was going to change the game. I thought they were going to fight. That was a great idea. That was a great use. I just didn't anticipate it. Doesn't mean I can't allow it. All right? Give them that shining moment. Because there's nothing worse than when you're doling out all kinds of magic items, especially things with really cool mechanics, and they're just sitting in somebody's backpack for months. They almost forget all the stuff that they've collected. An item is really only as good as the moment that it creates. So again, have that moment in mind when you introduce that item. But this leads to another problem. They've used the item. Now what? Well, let's use the example of my power suit. What if this one shot turns out not to be a one shot? What if we continue a campaign on this and now this character has a power suit? Is he just going to power stomp everyone? Well, now I have to find ways to mitigate that, to include that in the story. Maybe part of the problem is the power suit is out of juice. And now he's got to decide, can he try to find a power source? Can he hide that away somewhere and then go try to find a power source? Do they know what that power source is? Could this be the continuation of that previous story? The hunt for another source of power. They need another battery for the power suit, and they've got to go out and they got to find people who can make this happen. That could be a whole adventure. It could be that character's side quest during another adventure. There's all kinds of narrative possibilities there. The joy for your players comes from waiting for that perfect opportunity to use their item, right? It's not just that they might get to roll at advantage, or they might get another, a +1, a +2 on a roll. That's all well and good, but make the magic items truly magical in the moment. The other thing you can think about is, let's say they do come across the Sword of Omens. This is another thing I love to do, is to weave nostalgia in, or the Master Sword from Zelda, right? Something that the players will recognize and know exactly what that thing is and exactly what it's for. And the player characters have to sort of learn as they go. But what happens when they've used that item? Is it destroyed in the process? That's one solution. What happens if they end up with a sword that has a good buff on it, but later they level up and they get other weapons that are mundane that may be even more powerful? Well, rather than replacing that +1 magical sword that they found at level 1 with, a +3 sword they picked up when they reached a higher level, what if you gave them the opportunity to enhance that magic item? What if there's a legend about that magic item? Again, this becomes a thing that can be a side quest. It can be the entire quest. There's storytelling possibilities there. But now this character has had the same sword throughout all of these adventures. So rather than just throwing one away and picking up another magic item that's better, give that first item an opportunity to be enhanced. Maybe they need to go speak to a particular mage that knows the magic that will bring this Sword of Omens to its true power, right? Maybe there's a whole nother adventure that they can go on optionally that will allow all of them to update all of their gear. Sounds like fun. Sounds like possibilities. And I think that is a big part of making the adventure fun for your players, is give them the ability, give them the choice to choose the challenges that they face and have that payoff be something that's not just that stat buff. You're going to get a little bit of a stat buff from a special item anyway, but something that ties that item to that character in a way. And later on, maybe that Master Sword gets damaged. That has an emotional impact that a mundane sword getting damaged won't. If you've ever played the Witcher TTRPG, weapons breaking is part of the game. There are whole characters whose purpose is repair and maintenance of weapons, right? You're going to break your silver sword. Well, so what? You just go buy another one. Unless there's a narrative tie-in as to why that sword is special, right? Does that sword have a name? What does it mean to your character? Tie it in. And again, just because they've used it once doesn't mean that it doesn't have another purpose later on. You can always bring that idea back. And then I mentioned earlier, stealing from nostalgia. Don't be afraid to, right? I mentioned the Sword of Omens. I'm talking about the sword from Thundercats, right? It doesn't have to be that sword. But maybe you have a sketch of that sitting there. You say, and then you find a sword, and then you show the sketch. Again, your players who know what that is are going to be extra excited, because who wouldn't want that sword, right? It's like finding Luke Skywalker's lightsaber just lying around. That would be intense, right? This is a cool thing to have. But it's more cool for the players. Player characters have no idea what a lightsaber is, but how much fun they can have figuring out what it does, what it's capable of. And again, finding a particular use for it. You can reskin it. Just because I show you a picture of the Sword of Omens doesn't mean it has to be the sword. I don't have to have Thundercats in my universe to have that sword exist. And think about what that sword does, even in the show, right? Like, number one, it gets longer. Thunder, 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 Thundercats, ho. But he also has the eye, right? And he can do a little far sight with that. You can easily homebrew a sword that has all of those mechanics already built in and effectively works the same way. Why not, right? Again, I'll mention the Master Sword from Zelda. It's a very classic, very nostalgic piece of equipment. Like, don't be afraid to put something like that in. Take that idea, run with it. You can name it something else. You can draw it differently, whatever. There's no rules about how this works. So if all you want is a better sword, they can go to the shop and buy a better sword. They need a particular sword. They need a particular wand. They need a particular hat in order to make this adventure work. Suddenly that thing has a value beyond just what it's worth in gold, right? Something to think about, but that's how I go about it. I'm looking at the adventure and I'm saying, what are the puzzles that need to be solved, right? And there's lots of ways you can design puzzles. Some of them can be Skyrim-like. We're going to line things up to open the gate. Some of them are more, talking it over with people. You get the intrigue, right, of trying to get information, control information, whatever. Sometimes they just need to gather the right items in the right order or to perform particular tasks. These are all opportunities now where you can give them an item that fits that need, but also has value as something they can use in combat or something they can use between combats, right? That's where I look at magic items. Because we're playing in a world where magic exists. You probably have a wizard on your party who can cast spells. Whoop-de-doo. Like, magic exists. It's not special in that world in that way. But like the Sword of Omen, that's special, right? My power suit, that was a special moment. And again, it opens the door to the possibility of more storytelling. So remember to build your items with a compelling story. Give them a chance to have a particular spectacular shining moment, and let them grow with your characters. Let them become part of your characters. Let them become characters themselves. So now it's your turn. Head down to the comments. Tell me what kinds of items, like what are your favorite nostalgic items that you would love to see brought in to a D&D game? And how would you adapt it to playing in that world? Can't wait to hear your suggestions. Tune in next time for more DM tips, RPG ideas, inspiration, maybe even some craft stuff. Remember to like and subscribe. It only helps the channel grow. Appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in.